Hello, welcome everyone. We have been on a bit of a winter break and we are back today with an all-new Process Mining Café, and the topic is auditing. Today's Process Mining Café is a companion to a series that we are running currently on the blog, and the series is about process mining in audit. And for the Café session today, we have invited the authors of the article, Jasmine Handler and Andreas Presselmeier. Hello, Jasmine. Hello, Andreas.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining this session. You are both auditors at the City of Vienna Court of Audit. And in the article, you describe a project that I think was performed in 2019. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
At the Wiener Stadtwerke. And the nice thing about the article is that you describe very much in detail how you have applied process mining in this audit project with screenshots and concrete examples. So people can really see specifically how process mining performed in this concrete project. And those of you who are signed up for our camp mailing list have already received a preview of the full article. So you can read the whole article already. If you're just tuning in now, you can go to the blog and follow it along. Now, your efforts to share the experience with others is very much appreciated in the community, and I wanted to start by sharing some feedback that we've received from the community. For example, Jort Wager, auditor and language expert at the European Commission, has said on LinkedIn, "Big thanks to Jasmine and Andreas for sharing their experience. I strongly believe that process mining has a very important role to play in the future of public auditing." So he very much appreciates that you take the time to not just do it for yourself, but share it with others, and also believes very much in the possibilities that auditing has. And in fact, it's one of the great use cases that we see for process mining. So I'm very excited to talk about it in this in depth and to have this series going. And also Tom, for example, said, what a great and interesting topic. And he was asking whether there would be a recording because he can't attend as he is in a client meeting. And we, as with all the Process Mining Café sessions, also this session will be recorded and it will be available in 2 or 3 weeks on our YouTube channel, but also you can find it on the blog and you can sign up on the Café mailing list to be notified once the recording is available. But what you cannot do on the recording is talk with us while we are on the air. So that's the possibility that we have in these live sessions. So we can really have this discussion in the community. And we really would like to hear from you. So if you are watching this right now, you can join very easily by directly on this website where you're watching this video right now, just below. There's a possibility to join the chat. You can just type your name and press enter. You don't need an account, you don't need a password, nothing. Just type your name, any name, and you're in the chat. And you can talk with the others who are there, but also with us. And during the session, we will keep an eye on the chat, and we will pick up any points that are raised there. And this can be any experience that you have had yourself applying process mining in audit, but can also be questions. We're all defining this new method together. And so in the article, right, Jasmine and Andreas, you describe very much in detail this one concrete project so that people can really follow along. So what we have decided, what we wanted to do here today in the Café session is to take a little bit of a broader view and to take a step back and really talk a little bit more about the method and how, when you apply process mining in audit, what this changes, how this changes the traditional audit approach, in which places it changes something, and how does it change it? Does it get more work, less work, in which way? And so to start with that, we wanted to look at the data-driven audit approach and the whole context of the audit method. So we start with that, and so we have this one slide for that we wanted to share. So let's bring that up and talk with that. So on the highest level, we have the whole audit process, right? So that's the regular audit process, has nothing to do with auditing yet. Can you maybe talk us through these 6 phases that constitute the high-level audit?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I also want to thank you, Anne, for organizing this event, because, for example, all our audit reports and the results are public on our website, so everyone can read it. But of course, in our audit reports, we can't go into detail in the method itself. So here we are in touch with colleagues from other public auditing institutions, of course, but not we don't reach so many colleagues also from other fields. So I think it's really good to also have the chance to really talk about what we did, because maybe it helps others to see how you can get started and simply what you have to do in all the phases. But coming back to the overall audit process, we here, of course, follow the standardized audit process. I think in every institution, maybe the phases are named a little bit different, but they will be familiar to each auditor. So in the first phase, we always do the audit planning. At the City of Vienna Court of Audit, we have an annual audit cycle. So for each year, based on risk-based analysis, we define what audit projects we want to focus on in this audit period. And in the next phase, when really starting an audit, of course, we then do some preparations, especially regarding this specific audit topic. So here within the audit preparation, the audit teams are built. We make sure that we have all the infrastructure we need, get in touch with the audited parties, do some research in advance to make sure we have a good starting point before then finally starting the audit itself. Here we always start with a kickoff meeting with the audited party, where we also talk about what is the audit objective, what are our analysis questions, what data do we need. And then we finally go into the phase of conducting the audit, where we really do the audit work itself, where we collect data, where we do situation and deviation analysis and derive our findings, our recommendations, and the results for our audit report. Then in the next phase, we are in reporting. So here we have our audit report that is also discussed with the audited party, of course. But this is also the product that is public. So this audit report is the thing that every citizen can really read, because they are published on our website.
And just to jump in here, so that's the nice thing also about the project that you describe in the article, also the audit report from that project, which is not about process mining, but just about the results like you describe. It's also public and it's also linked from the article, so everyone can access that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And after the reporting phase, we have the submission of the final report. So this is kind of course, the reporting phase reporting itself is also divided into several steps, where we also have our discussion phase with the audited party. They can also give us feedback on the audit report and so on. And then the final report is sent to the it's called Stadtrechnungsausschuss. I'm sorry, I don't know the English word now at the moment. So that's the institution that discusses our audit reports and finally also has to accept them. So they are finally, the audit is closed in the end. Yeah, and then we have the announcement of measures. That's kind of the follow-up phase. So here, of course, we look a certain period of time after the audit was closed. We look at how did the audited party, what did they do with our recommendation? Did they already implement everything? And simply kind of have a follow-up.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So this is these are the steps that might be a little bit different for maybe an internal audit at a company. Of course, you have in the public audit, there are certain steps like you described, some public hearings and yeah, maybe a more formalized procedure. But overall, like you say, it's similar for also probably internal audits. And for public audit, how long would you say does the whole process typically take from beginning to the end?
It always depends on the audit field itself, so how big the audit is. In general, we work we have about 3 months for one audit, for very big ones, maybe 6 months. And then it always depends on the topic itself when it is discussed in the Stadtrechnungshof-Ausschuss, so when the hearing takes place. So I guess in overall it's half a year up to a year until the final process is closed.
Okay.
Always depending on when the audit takes place and when the next date is for the hearing.
Yeah. So the 3 to 6 months, that's for conducting the audit only.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this is also the phase that we're now in the next step diving a little bit more into detail, right? So this is like zooming in to only this step, conducting the audit again on a more detailed level. We can again identify 5 phases within the conducting the audit phase. So how would you briefly summarize those 5 steps?
I think the 5 steps in the conducting the audit are, first of all, the first step is the audit concept. I hope you can show it, the steps. Yeah, okay, now it's on. The first step is the audit concept. This audit concept takes the main aspects of the audit itself and shows an overview how we do the audit itself. I think it's the first point and first view how we can use process mining in an audit, and gives an imagination. Is process mining usable for this audit or not? The second one is then the collection of data. Collection of data means that we can check all the available data, get a request to the public audit to the audited party, and collect the data and get the data. The next step is the situational and deviation analysis, where we have the data to analyze the information to the questions we want to answer, and the audit teams they are described in the audit concept. The next one is so if the situational and deviation analysis are done, there are the audit results and recommendations. So you get the final conclusions of the audit results and all the results of the analysis. The next one is the audit trail and the evidence to save this audit trail and get a solid evidence of the results, the recommendations, and also from the analysis. And the last one is to save them in an audit file for later inspection or later inspection of an evidence. So I think that's the main aspects of these 5 detailed tasks to conduct the audit.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And like Jasmine, like you said before, that's indeed the nice thing, that we can have these kind of interactions and discussions about the method, which is something that among the audit community can be useful for people who don't know that much about process mining yet. And we want to do that in this session by showing them also how it relates to the practice that they know, like how does this change with process mining, what exactly is different. And we will do that in detail, but also maybe for the people who are more coming from the process mining side and are maybe interested but not so much experts themselves or are not auditors themselves. Can you give us a sense, like if you would do an audit without process mining, right? Traditionally it's done without process mining. What are some other methods that would be employed in this kind of typical audit? Some other analysis methods, for example. Can you give an example?
Yeah, maybe the most traditional, far away from every data analysis aspect is simply the document check. So of course, we always look at, especially when we do compliance audits, if the documentation is good, maybe in paper, maybe electronically, depending on how the process works itself. Yeah, then we also use simply statistical methods like mean values, variances, looking at the distribution of data. So we also have a focus on financial audits. So the City of Vienna Court of Audit is separate, with the part of the group of financial audits and the group of technical audits, the safety aspects. But of course, within the financial audits, we also do, for example, analysis like Benford analysis. And yeah, I think it really, really depends on the audit itself. Andreas, do you know some different examples that come up for you?
No, I think that's the main aspects, and some analysis of sums of special values in some cases. For example, financial data and so on. Yeah, I think that's all. Yeah.
So in contrast to such a financial audit, for example, would you be more in the category of IT audits, for example?
In general, or with process mining?
Yeah, in general, maybe. Is there or let's say, put it this way, is there a differentiation between IT audits and financial audits? Sometimes I've seen that, so maybe it's
I
different.
think nowadays they kind of go hand in hand. Of course, it always depends on which level you find yourself within the audit. But of course, most financial transactions use an IT system in the background. So of course, the IT part is always included in our audits up to a certain degree. We have always different focuses as well. So sometimes we look more into detail in the system itself. For example, when we look at the internal control system, how it is implemented in the system, are there technical controls and something like that. And sometimes we look more on how money is spent, for example. So here we are more in the operational aspect. So where did the money go? Did everything was according to the purpose it was supposed to be? And yeah, but I think you can't really separate IT audit and financial audit at all, because of course IT systems are essential for doing financial transactions nowadays.
Yeah, I can see that. So it's all related, right? So you have to look at it from a holistic perspective.
I think process mining is a possibility to get a broader aspect and utility for financial audits, like not so in IT audits. IT audits give an focus to special IT problems, and I think the financial audit uses process mining as an IT tool for special insight analysis to get a better insight of financial data and so on.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe for the process miners who are not so familiar with auditing, so one common question or control that might be checked by an auditor is a rule like the 4 I's principle, right? Segregation of duty rule, where you want that 2 different people are approving, I don't know, a vacation, a cost reimbursement or anything to prevent fraud. So then, like what Andreas, what you just said, right? If you check on the system level, then you might check whether there's a control in place that on the system level prevents that 2 people can do that.
Yes.
And then it's not a data analysis, but you really check the system, right? So that's a different thing.
You check the IT system. It is really work in order to the regulations, and the process mining is, I think, the other side of data analysis with the data in the IT system. So in the IT systems, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so great. So that gives us, I think, a good context. Like, yeah, what are the steps that are being done in the conducting the audit phase? And then, yeah, we have been thinking like, what are now the steps, how process mining fits into this process, right? And yeah, together with Rudy, when you did this project, you organized them in these 9 deliverables. So in a way, different steps in the project. But what we are doing here is that we are using them as phases to look at the process that we go through, right? So I made it a little bit bigger here now. Maybe I need to go back. Now, can we see it? Yes, so now you should see it up a little bit bigger up on the screen. And these are the 9 phases that we now want to talk through. And we can see that, yeah, process mining, yeah, really mostly, not completely maybe, but mostly affects these 2 steps in the conducting the audit step, which are the collection of data and situational and deviation analysis. And this is exactly what you described in your article very nicely, step by step. And what we also want to do here in the session now is basically to go through these 9 steps from data analysis concept to data analysis results, and to really think about each of those phases and to think about, okay, how, if at all, does this change with process mining compared to if we would not do any process mining in this phase. So yeah, so let's get started with this. So we start with the first phase, the data analysis concept. Would you say, are there any changes at all with process mining, and if so, how?
Well, I would say the data analysis concept, like we perform it, is very similar to the audit concept. So we make up our mind what is the main audit objective, what are the main analysis questions on a very aggregate level, but still what do we want to focus on, look at who is our audit party, what processes we want to consider, what are the information we need to really look at them and to make our statement regarding compliance, for example. But I think the main difference here is that when performing process mining in an audit within the data analysis concept, we look far more in detail what infrastructure is there available. So what infrastructure, what IT systems does the audited party use? Those are, of course, questions that are always relevant within our audits. But I would say when we don't have this process mining focus, we deal with this topic in a later phase. But here, of course, right at the beginning, we need to identify if the processes are really performed in IT systems, which systems are used, and is there any chance to get the data out of the system? And of course, before that, is the system recorded in a way that it is usable for process mining? Because of course, for process mining, we need data in a very specific format, because otherwise we cannot process it. Whilst when we are open in our audit and we maybe have not decided on the method that we want to use in this phase, then we take the data the way we get it and decide what method we use later on. So I would say here the main difference is really that the focus must be on the IT infrastructure and on the IT systems that are used to perform the overview of process mining can be applied in this audit.
That's very, very interesting. So it's like you would look at systems, but you're really, like you say, you do it earlier. You do it in this phase already. And otherwise you would do it later. So it's more important. Does it also take longer? Is it by taking a more detailed look, it requires more preparation, or you would spend the same amount of work on looking at the systems in a later phase?
I think it's the same amount to identify the IT systems like in the normal audit. I think it's the first and the main part to decide if process mining would work for this audit team or would not work. So if you don't check the necessary IT systems and check the data they are recorded and it's not available, so I think it's a turning point to use process mining in this audit or not to use. So you can check there is an IT system, but if there is not any available data and will not record it, so you can't use process mining in this step. So I think it's a decision point. Can you use process mining or can you not use process mining?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, very, very clear. Okay, so then, we get to the second phase, analysis questions, defining the analysis questions. And I think what you show in the article very nicely, for example, is that first of all, you define which questions you want to answer, but also for each of the questions, you already try to define it in quite some detail to really think about how you want to measure and answer this question. So I'm curious, is that part of the regular method as well? Would you always define it this detailed, or do you see any differences compared to the traditional way of working if you compare the two?
So the first part you mentioned, defining the analysis question, I think this is the same also with other audit methods. So at the beginning, of course, we define what analysis questions should be in focus, because depending on the analysis questions, all our later actions and the documents and information we need, they are all related to the analysis questions. But the second part you mentioned, this part of really going into detail and make the analysis questions as measurable as possible, this for us is something we usually don't do in this level of detail. So of course we make up our mind on what do we need to answer these analysis questions, but when using process mining, it helped us a lot to really define the metric, for example. So how can we measure it? And also look at the process and the process step that is needed in order to answer this analysis question. So I think here we are far more focused and specific on making it measurable compared to our traditional methods, where the audit question often is there, but not in this detail defined how we can measure it at this point of time. So here, of course, I think with process mining, it's always an iterative approach. So within your audit, you learn something more. So for example, here, we always rework our audit questions a bit because when having more experience in this audit field, we, for example, identify aspects we did not consider at the beginning, so we slightly rework them. That's something that also happens in our normal audit work. But also, I would say, in a bit later phase, because here within our audit projects, we did not see any data at all at this point.
Yeah, so you do it based on the understanding of the process, for example, that you define for these and these, maybe sticking with the segregation of duty example, for these and these two steps, there should be a segregation of duty rule, and that's defining specifically like the question, right? Before you have seen any data and know about the data fields and things like that.
I think in this step you get only an imagination or an idea which data is required and which data fields you want to use. Yeah, so get only an imagination on it without to see the real data. So it's only an idea, and this idea comes true or comes not true to the real data.
Yeah. And if you say that normally you would also have these iterations and the further refinement and more detailed over time definition of the question, but it would be later, is then the main reason that you do it early here in the second step to be able to check for data availability or for other reasons also?
I think the main part is data availability, because when we define it in a very early phase, we then first of all, can check if all the data is available or if there are analysis questions we simply cannot answer with process mining. And if that's the case, we then can, for example, make a plan B and answer this analysis question in the audit, but for example, with another method. So here we have this flexibility that we have then, of course, more time and resources to react if data is not available in certain fields. And also for us, so for me especially, I think it's like kind of a checklist. What data do I really need? So when you go then in the later phase, really and looking at the data, make your data model, it can be overwhelming because IT systems log so many data. And this definition of the analysis question and the metric for each analysis question, this can help to stay focused on the main tasks, the main events and activities that you need for your process mining project, for example.
Yeah, great. That's a good point. Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so this brings us then to the third step. And in the third step, you are starting to look at data then, right? The process and data model, or not yet?
Now you get in this step, you get an inside view of the process management and their defined processes in the institution, and get the documents and get all the information how the should processes should be, and also a first insight about the data which is in the processes are used or generated, I think. Yeah.
So Jasmine, sorry.
So this is really the phase where we get the first information regarding the process, how it really should work. So what is the should process of the organization? We get our process descriptions, for example, do a process walkthrough to make sure every relevant step is also documented in the should process, or if there are, for example, any deviations or additional steps and something like that. I guess that is also a point we do in a lot of audits. So this is really common, looking at process descriptions and also this process walkthrough. It's a very common method. But here I think we have, again, a more data-specific focus. So what we do is that when looking at the process, we also think about things like, okay, is this process step done within an IT system or manually? And so we can split up the process description, for example, and define those activities that we can use for process mining and those who are not, where no data is available because, for example, they are performed manually. And then in the next step, also find the connection to the IT system. And also think about things like, where is this data stored? How do we get it out? On a very, really meaning all the data. Because traditionally, when we do our audits, we often take samples. So for example, we look at 100, 200, depending, of course, how big the data is, so how many cases are available. And then for these, for example, 100 samples, we look in more detail and look at the documentation and directly into the IT system on the user interface and see if everything is there. For example, segregation of duties, if we see the checks from two different people. But with process mining, we need to extract the raw data of all the cases that have been performed. So here, of course, it's also a question, where is this data stored and how do we get it out? I think this is could be a difference to traditional audits in this way, where you do your audit on the document level and not on the data level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I see what you mean. So So yeah, in the article you show the documented model, right? So in this case, you had there was a model available that described the ideal or the expected process, and like you just said, if that's not possible, then you do a data walkthrough, or you maybe as a clarification, do you do the walkthrough also to understand the model if it's there or to validate it? Do you always do that, or if you have a model, you just use the model and don't do another walkthrough with the audited party?
It's very common to do this walkthrough on top. For example, it's our first choice when there is no documentation of all. But it's also very common to do it as an in addition to the documented model. Also, kind of to understand then a bit how the real process works, because often the documented process does not represent the real process, how it is performed. And so with the process workflow, you also get a good insight if there are some tasks different or in addition, because of course it's also always, the process description is always an aggregation of reality. So you won't do any single step in your process description, because then no one will read it if it's 50 pages and every single step is included. And when doing the process walkthrough, you also get an insight of what happens in between. So I think this is a good way to get a better understanding of the process.
That's interesting, because that was one of the things I was curious about also, because you have this model, and then you based on this model you look for the data, and what you're describing is that the process model side of things, trying to understand the expected process based on a model, based on a walkthrough. So that's basically, that does not really change compared to how you would traditionally do. Even if you would not do process mining, you probably would do that part also. It's more how you then relate this expected process to the data that you look for, so to prepare the data extraction of, like you say, all the data. So there you're looking for the different tables, like which activities can be found in which systems and which tables. So that's the step that's basically different compared to a regular audit. Did I understand this correctly?
Yes, I think so. I think the process walkthrough or process documentation is the first step to get an imagination and get the information, how does the process perform in the different activities, and the different activities gives easy readable information how this activity is performed. And I think that's the difference to a normal audit, is that's the part to get this information in the readable raw data in the IT systems. That's the additional part, special part and intense part, to get the right data and to search the right data in the raw data, in which data field and which table and so on in the IT system performs and shows us the data itself.
Yeah, and that brings us directly to the next step, right? So in the fourth step, or the fourth phase, you're turning it around. So basically, based from, like you just said, from those tables that you have identified, now you're looking for the process mining information. And so how can we imagine that? Do you really take, let's say you have identified table 1, table 2, table 3 in this ERP system. Do you then look at the complete table and look at all the fields and try to understand what they are and say, okay, we can use that for process mining in this way, or this we don't need? How do you make the distinctions, like which of the fields you are using?
I think first of all, it's necessary to get a view about all the data, to get a very good overview how the IT system performs and records the data. I think when you get only a specific view of special tables, you can't get an overview about how the tables work together and connected together. So I think it's necessary to get an overview about all the data, but it's also necessary, if you have the overview, to specify and reduce the information what you need, because it's then the amount of data is then too much to process in a further way.
right? So we come back to that a little bit later, right? The complexity that you're then faced with. So in this phase, so one of the things that's maybe a note towards the process miners in general, who are sometimes wondering, like, how do you actually get process mining information or an event log out of a system that does not have like a history, right? There are some systems like IT service management systems, CRM systems, workflow systems. They have kind of a history or an audit trail or something like that where you can export the data, and sometimes you have it immediately in the right format and you don't need to specify what the steps in the process are, but you automatically get, for example, all the status changes that have been used in the working of the incidents or changes in the IT service management system. Now, if you are working with an ERP system, like you often do in audits, and you have also shown in your example, you have to look for timestamps that are related to activities that are relevant in the process, right? So then, you're looking in these different tables. You might find different timestamps there also. So, how was that? Is that clear? Which activity is reflected by that, or which ones you should include as an activity for your event log?
I think this can be very tricky. So often, especially when you don't know the ERP system in detail, and also the specifications the organization that uses this ERP system has made, then it can be really hard to interpret the data without really having the process knowledge. So here we are always in really deeply in contact with our audited party and with the process experts from the audited party, so they can explain us what the timestamps represent. Because often there are some slides, different changes, some customizing, for example, in the ERP system, and then the data you need can be in a different field, like, for example, the organization you audited before. So here I think it's really important also to always be in contact and to share your expectations and your interpretation with the audited party to make sure that you get the right timestamps. Because of course, if you take the wrong timestamps here, all your analysis results will be wrong regarding the specific question. But especially for me, I don't have that much experience with it before. It's good that you mentioned the IT service management processes. We started our process mining journey with IT service management processes. Here it was really easy because the status changes are mostly also named with clear names. So you just looking at them, you know what happened in the system at this state in time. But within the ERP system, we used so far, or we audited so far, it is really hard to find out the meaning without help from the process expert.
Yeah, you really need them to help you. Yeah, I can imagine.
I think I also agreed with Jasmine. I think it's absolutely necessary to get an audited party with the knowledge of the processes and the IT system which records the information. And like Jasmine mentioned, it is necessary because there are some modifications or customizations, and the audited party has this knowledge about the customization, and all the parts, they are changed and specially adapted. So I think it's very useful, and I think it's necessary to get the audited party involved in this step and get their knowledge about this, the specifications information here.
Yeah, exactly. And so So I was also wondering, in the article you describe in a later phase how you actually ended up with many more activities than were initially kind of maybe sketched in this high-level process, which is logical, right? Because the documented process is often more high level and just shows the most important steps. But was that because in the data you found many more timestamps, like for more detailed steps? Is that where these additional activities came from, because you found additional timestamps, or did they come from a different place?
Yeah, on the one hand, we found additional timestamps and additional activities that we then thought would add value to the analysis, so we included them. And on the other hand, for example, in this specific project, there were far more levels of releasing an order or an invoice, for example, like we expected at the beginning. We thought there may be 1 or 2 release steps, but they had far more release steps and also kind of pre-release and then also 4i principle. So here this kind of this kind of exploded a bit. So we then had again a very high complexity because we included all the additional timestamps we identified within the data model and then the raw data extraction.
Yeah. And did that take more time than you would normally spend in this phase for a regular traditional audit, let's say?
I would definitely say so. Especially defining the raw data, validating the data, and then also the next phase of data transformation. Within our experience, those steps were far more time consuming compared to traditional audits.
Yeah. And so if you, like, in the beginning you mentioned, like, if one just takes samples, right? For example, you take a sample of 100 items. Would that then be of a certain document type? So for example, 100 invoices or 100 orders. But but you don't need to connect them, or why does it take more time?
Yeah, I think simplified spoken, when we stick with the very simple example of orders or invoices. Here, when we look at the document itself, so the real invoice, the raw data is clear. We have, for example, 10,000 invoices. That's it. They are there. And then we take our samples out of them. So of course we have our sample techniques in the background, but maybe it's also because here we have far more experience, so it's easier to take a sample because we did it for years now and all our colleagues do it for years. So here simply there is the knowledge and it makes it really easy. And also the methods are standardized already within our organization. And here with process mining, it was something completely new. And also I think the complexity is even higher, because of course here we also could have said, okay, we don't only look at the invoice releases, for example, and only the steps, and then count, okay, there were 10,000 invoices, do we have 10,000 releases? Would be very easy. But of course we want to look at the process as a holistic system, so at the whole process, and therefore we have to connect the data.
Yeah,
I guess
exactly.
traditional audits or with other methods are sometimes more easy to separate the audit questions and also to, for example, share it within your audit team. For example, you look at the invoices, I look at the orders. Here, it's far too connected, and you can split it up that easily, I would say.
I think it's a very high level, not high level, difficult learning and working, because in the traditional way you cut to one object, like invoices, like orders. And in the use of process mining, you must imagine and realize the connections and the network of all this information is stored in the whole IT systems to use them and to use it for process mining. If there is not an overview about the connections and the connected objects, you can't use process mining. It's not possible. In the traditional way, you get 100 orders, check them with the traditional methods, analysis methods, and get results. In process mining, it's not possible without the connections and the connected objects.
And I guess also for the audited party, it's more difficult to provide us with the data because everyone knows how to download their invoices from an ERP system. But you kind of have to be an expert to know how you get the raw data out of the system. So often they are also, there's also the need to, we need support from the IT provider, for example, because the process expert himself or herself does not have the knowledge how you technically can get out the information from the system. So this, of course, also takes more time.
Yeah. So that's something that one can maybe expect or keep in mind that could happen, that's extra time one needs to plan for. And so maybe you mentioned already the audited party and for them getting the raw data out, but also then in the next step, right? If the data is not available as an audit file or like as a history, like we mentioned before with other systems, that's sometimes or often the case, IT service management, workflow systems, and so on. Here it's not, but you had to put it together to exactly make those connections that you mentioned. So that's what is then happening in the data transformation step. You did that with an ETL tool, but you also described that you made, it was not one step, but you actually had to work iteratively and make multiple versions of this transformation to put the data together. And then you always did the cross-checking with the audited party. So I was curious, how exactly did you do the cross-checking and how did that work differently maybe compared to the traditional way of working?
So here it is important to know that we in general don't have access to the productive systems from the audited party. So here we did not have any chance to look at this ERP system ourselves. So we were always dependent on our audited party. And cross-checking, it was simply we made our data connection transformation and then got our cases, so to say, with information, okay, the order was put on this day and released on that day and so on. And then we sent some samples to the audited party to, kind of the task to verify it. So they then looked at the productive system for this specific order number, for example, and then looked at the productive system, how is it documented there, when did what step happen, and gave us the feedback if we did the data transformation. And at the beginning, for example, we often had the problem that there were some steps missing, like, for example, invoice releases and so on, because we had one-to-N and N-to-1 relationships. We did not consider enough at the beginning. This was something that was quite tricky for us. So here we had to do certain specifications again and again until our data validation kind of was positive. And we got the feedback from the audited party that all the cases were all the data was linked correctly and represents the real cases.
Yeah. And the whole step, the data transformation, putting the data together and the cross-checking, would you say that would normally not be necessary at all because you get the samples for the different document types and you can check them separately. So is this an additional step that you have to do for process mining in this case?
I think it's a more intensive step in process mining and in this new way of auditing, because in the normal traditional way it's not so intense because you get the information from the audited party and he samples this information and transmitted the information. But in the step of the use of process mining, it's necessary to get these rechecks to verify if your data transformation works in a really useful and compliance way to the system, like the real system from the audited party. So we must recheck in every time that we are safe in our data transformation, and also the audited party agrees with this transformation. So I think it's a most intense part and really necessary part.
Yeah. And is that possible to, I mean, it's so hard to say always. People want to know how much time does it take to do process mining, and it really, like we have already discussed, that you can't say that because it really depends. Sometimes the data is already there. You don't have to do any transformations. You can directly import it into the process mining tool and analyze it. And sometimes it can take really long. For example, Mieke Jans, who also joined you on a past process mining café, right? We talked about process mining research activities and things like that. I think 2020 process mining camp. She once had her first project on process mining when she started to work at Deloitte, and it took her 9 months to put all the data together for one, I think procure to pay or one SAP process. So. We can't really say that, but maybe from your experience for this one particular project, so this additional step with the cross-checking and, of course, the added difficulty that you couldn't go there yourself because there were the restrictions during the pandemic, and you always had to do these validations. Was that something that you had planned for in the project, or did that maybe create some delays or some kind of pressure to stay on time? How did that go time-wise, this additional step?
Yeah, fortunately it did not take us 9 months, but I think, we also spent some weeks on this step, but we were prepared for it that it would take long in this case, because we knew, first of all, this case would be more complex compared to our audit projects we did before with process mining. So at the beginning, for example, we had this IT service management process. I think, data transformation was 2 hours or so, just doing some Excel, just renaming some columns and loading the data in. So this was really quick. And here we were prepared that it would take some time. So we planned a time, we planned some more time here. But on the other hand, I think that would come later. We here saved then time doing the data analysis, so there we were quicker. But here it simply took us more time. But I also think when we would do a project with the same ERP system in future, then of course with the experience we have now, and also with the higher knowledge we have in the ETL tool we use, then we here would also be faster again.
Okay.
Depending on your experience and the complexity of the process.
Yeah, so it's a learning experience and also an investment in building up skills on the ETL tool, but also then being able to, you can really reuse maybe some different customizing, but you could do it faster for the next project.
Yeah.
Yes, so so if we think about the different steps, so this is the data transformation. You have done the cross-checking with the audited party. So the next step is, or the next the outcome of that are the data sets. And in your case, you describe also that because of these many-to-many relationships, right? Some of the process miners will know about this problem. You need to create actually different data sets to be able to take different views on the process. So for example, in your case, you created a data set from the invoice perspective and one from the order perspective, because different questions required a different perspective to answer them. So here, you created then, as a result of this data transformation, there were 2 data sets that you use for your process mining analysis. And I'm curious, so is how that is in the traditional way. For example, I remember many years ago at one of the early process mining camps, we had a presentation from Joris Soons, who was an auditor at the Ministry of Finance in the Netherlands. So they were auditing the different ministries in the country. And so I think the process that he described was from a subsidy application process where companies could apply for government subsidies, and so they were checking this application process, and it was about a lot of money, right? And so it's about also 4 eyes principles, but also how much time and how well were these applications checked. But what he mentioned back then was that actually process mining made things easier because they had one data set. So in this case, the workflow system had like one data set that they could then use to answer all their questions. And normally they would get like samples of different systems or different aspects and would have many different files. So I'm curious about this. In this phase, like, is it normal to have one data set, or like you had 2 for these different views, or in the traditional way, do you have many different files with samples? How does this normally look like, just to get more of an impression?
I think in a traditional way we have some separate files in different ways, and answers the questions. And in this case, there is a data set and gives much more possibilities in the analysis and answer the questions we mentioned in the analysis questions. There are more possibilities in the data sets to answer the questions, because like the process mining tool is an easier way to differ the attributes in the software and give an answer. Only if there is an answer, is the data not available, you must enrich the data in these steps before to get the right data set. I think this step is a little bit easier to get an answer because the possibilities in the software is easier. Like in the traditional way, you have one file. This file answers these questions like better or not better. And if you want to another answer, you must use another file or information to get this. And think in the software, it's easier to enrich the data in the step before and get a new data set.
Yeah, I would agree on this. So maybe the data transformation or linking the data that costs us a lot of time within the process mining projects. This leads us then to one data set before the information included. And thinking at this point at the moment, when I think of other audit projects, then often the evidences and the sources for one finding are separate over a lot of different files. So then for your finding, you again have to do this linkage between the files and document it, then in your audit trail and evidence. So it's, just, I would agree on this, that with process mining, you often only have 1 or 2 data sources, then at the end, so 1 or 2 data sets. And with other methods, often the information are separated over certain files, have then to be linked together as well.
Okay, interesting. So that relates a little bit already then also to the next two steps, right? The discovered model and answering the questions. So based on the model that you discover based on the data with process mining tool, first of all, and you described this nicely in the article, you have to find the right level. So that takes some time, right? Maybe to simplify further or break things down and really understand. But also, that's a little bit what I heard just now. Also, it gives you the flexibility to answer the questions from the beginning, but also to really look even further. Maybe if the question is a little bit different or a little bit maybe an additional question, it's something that you can actually answer because you have this full representation of reality, right, that you can use to check. You don't know what I mean, huh?
I think the step of the data sets is one decision point in the whole of the 9 step, because I think it's the decision point. If you see you have the right data sets and get an answer of the analysis questions, and you see are the next steps like the discovered model, the analysis answers, and the data analysis results, I think are the easy followed steps if you have the right data set. So I think it's the decision point in this step. If I had the right data set, and then now the steps are easy to perform, I think. If you don't have the right data sets, there is a decision point. Can you follow the next steps or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And so in the traditional way, if you, for example, let's say you have a segregation of duty rule, I mean, you don't need process mining, right, to check segregation of duties. You could do it directly on the data with a query tool or an audit tool. Would you then skip like this discovered model step, for example, go right from the data set to the analysis result? So is that discovered model step, that seems a little bit special and related to process mining specifically, or do you have something similar with other audit methods as well?
I think with other audit methods, you often don't get this whole view of the whole process. Mm-hmm. So it's thinking of this example with segregation of duty. When you do the analysis, you get the answer for a specific this part of the process. But with process mining, of course, within the phase of discovered model, you get the whole experience. So from the first step to the last step, and also a good insight on the complexity of the process and how many steps there are. Because in traditional methods, you often specifically focus on your analysis question already. Mm-hmm. Here comes a bit later, because of course when doing the analysis answers you then also focus on the specific analysis questions, but here I think process mining adds the big value that you get the big picture of the process.
Yeah, exactly. And so the one thing that I noticed in your article, when you describe, for example, how you analyze the one question that you pick as an example there, then you actually end up refining this question a little bit, or also defining it a little bit differently, because of the availability of the data, or how the data was structured, right? So to answer the data, actually you had to change the question a little bit. It was still answering the same intent, let's say, that you had, but it was a little bit different. So basically you have this flexibility because of the full data to make this change and to refine the question. So I'm wondering whether this is the same or different.
And also looking at the whole process as itself, so the whole process. Sometimes also other analysis questions pop up. So you look at the process, you just look at strange process paths. Maybe some you thought that could not happen, so you did not have them in mind. Or you simply did not have the creativity as an auditor to make up your mind that something like that can happen. So here I think we made the experience that sometimes looking at the discovered model, we also find additional analysis questions, simply, I would say, maybe simplified spoken per accident. So something strange pops up. Of course, this is something that happens always when doing an audit. Something strange happens and you put your focus on that. But yeah, here you have this, I would say, in this phase with the discovered model, when you really also see the different variants of a process.
That's a good point. It's not just if I understand you correctly, the questions that you have defined in the beginning, but maybe questions you would not have thought about asking just by seeing something that maybe looks a little bit odd. You get the opportunity to investigate and maybe discover things that are not okay, that you didn't think about asking for.
Yeah, for example, or just slides. Sometimes they are also just very slight variations that then lead, of course, to the question, how can this even happen in a process when you use an IT system and it's workflow-based and it should be standardized?
Yeah.
Where are the backdoors? How can things like this happen in reality? So I think this is a very good benefit process mining gives you.
Okay, so that these kind of things that you can then investigate and clarify and really follow, let's say, the trace and through this visibility to really see what the reason behind it is, let's say.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So here with process mining, our sampling starts at this point already, where we have certain clues, certain certain conspicuousnesses that we think are worth looking at in more detail. Yeah. And here, of course, it can also be that there are 200 cases following this path. And when we look at 5 and see if they have something in common, and if,
Yeah. Okay, great. And then, if we come to the last phase, the last step, the results, presenting the results, summarizing the results, do you see any differences there compared to the traditional approach?
Not really.
No, I think from the like, how do I say, the results itself, they are there with a traditional method or with process mining. I think what is nice is how you can present them, because of course with this visualization of the process, you can also show very easily to the audited party how you identified, for example, this specific variance that deviates from all the others, and the evidence is really clear, and also for them to look at their systems and to really investigate on themselves. It's easier process mining sometimes. Of course, it's also has process mining experience and analysis themselves. But you made quite good, in general, quite good experience just with realities. Often, like, oh no, that cannot happen.
Yes.
You audit wrong, and then you can just open your process mining tool and click around, see how here's the case, please explain from, and this is this underlines your finding a bit more visual, you can see it more easy.
Yeah.
I think it's easily explained in the evidence and sometimes in the reports for diagrams or so on.
Yeah. So the communication aspect, but also, that they maybe can see some things themselves, like as an added value, right, beyond the actual audit. So that's it has been very helpful. So thank you very much for taking the time to walk us through those steps. Maybe if we summarize a little bit, or what would you say maybe as a tip for other auditors who are also interested in process mining? Is there anything specifically that you would want to give on their way?
I'll give one tip, and I think it's the most useful tip. Have a strong commitment of the head of your unit or your department to use process mining. And my experience is it is a useful and a very good way to get a better insight in audit themes and data of audit themes. And I think it's a very good method and analysis for data in an audit theme.
Yeah, so getting commitment so that people have realistic expectations, right? We have heard already some things might take more time to plan for it realistically, but also, well, to learn about it, right? I mean, both of you have, it's an investment also personally, right? To develop yourself professionally, building up skills in a certain area. So, yeah, you have been active with process mining already for a few years now. What's your personal take on this journey?
Well, for me, I think one good advice is that you should start really, really small. So, of course, we also wanted to do really big projects at the beginning, but they get very complex easily. And I think this often demotivates you then on the way when it takes you very, very long and maybe you don't get the results right. So I would recommend to start with a very small, easy process and simply start working on your tool experience and that you get to know the method, that you get to know how to handle complexity, and then increase step by step. And I think this also helps to build the commitment of your organization, for example, because if you can show kind of quick wins in the beginning, you have your evidence that process mining can work and that it can give you good results. And then you can get complex the right experience. Because there are always, again, challenges on the way. Because you have to invest time and build up knowledge. And yeah, but it was really also very interesting experience, and also to get a bit of a change of perspective, because process mining, I think you also have to from another angle, like.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's the perfect closing words for this session. So take that on your way. Thank you very much again, Jasmine and Andreas, for first of all sharing your experiences, contributing the article, but also joining us here today to walk through the audit process and how it changes if you use process mining. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to all of you for watching and being here with us. We will see you again for the next Process Mining Café, which will be in about a month, and it will be about game analytics. Okay, see you then. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.